One of the greatest swindlers in American history, Charles Ponzi, had in his early life the makings of a grand thief. His life was peppered with fraudulent transactions, devious schemes, a string of aliases, stints in jail, and a whole lot of cunning. The Ponzi scheme, or the type of investment fraud in which handsome returns are promised from made-up sources, was actually not his brainchild. However, his use of this scheme brought it to public awareness, thereby permanently associating his name to this investment fraud. Charles Ponzi was born Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi in Lugo, Italy in 1882. He claimed to have come from a well-to-do family. He attended the University of Rome La Sapienza, where he reportedly spent most of his 4 years going to bars, cafes, and the opera. On November 15, 1903, at age 21, Charles Ponzi moved to the United States, docking in Boston, Massachusetts. He famously said,
"I landed in this country with $2.50 in cash and $1 million in hopes, and those hopes never left me."
He spent the next few years learning English and taking on odd jobs along the East Coast. In 1907, Ponzi moved to Montreal, Canada, and worked at Banco Zarossi, where he got a first glimpse of fraud. Luigi Luis Zarossi, the bank's founder, had invested in bad real estate loans and promised his clients impossibly high amounts of return on their capital. The bank eventually failed, and Zarossi fled to Mexico with the bank's money. Unemployed and penniless, Ponzi was plotting a return to the United States. One day, he walked into an office of a former client of Zarossi's and, finding no one there, wrote himself a check amounting to $423.58 and forged the signature. When confronted by authorities later on, he held up his hand and said,
"I'm guilty."
He spent the next 3 years in a prison. Upon his release in 1911, Ponzi got involved with smuggling Italian immigrants across the United States border. He again spent time in jail, but this time in Atlanta prison. It was in this prison that he met criminals whom he idolized. One of them was Charles Morse, a wealthy Wall Street businessman and speculator. When Ponzi was released, he returned to Boston, where he met and married Rose Maria Necco, a stenographer. Ponzi started a legitimate advertising plan to sell to businesses, but after a few months, it failed. A few weeks later, an innocent business letter arrived in the mail, and in it, he saw an opportunity to make money. Inside the envelope was an International Reply Coupon, or IRC. The purpose of this postal reply coupon was to allow someone in one country to send it to a correspondent in another country who could then use it to pay the postage of a reply. IRCs were priced at the cost of postage in the country of purchase, but could be exchanged for stamps to cover the cost of postage in the country where it's redeemed. If these values were different, then there was a profit. Ponzi claimed that the net profit on these transactions after expenses and exchange rates was in excess of 400%. He started his scheme by sending IRCs to his relatives in Italy, but when he tried to redeem the coupons in the States, he ran into a lot of red tape. Ponzi needed help. He then approached his friends in Boston to finance a scheme, offering them a 50% return, which he was able to deliver. He then launched the Securities Exchange Company. Soon, word got around about Ponzi's firm, and investments kept pouring in. By February of 1920, Ponzi's total take was $5,000. By March, he had made $30,000. By May, he had made $420,000, and by July, he was a millionaire. His operation, however, was running at a big loss. Whatever he paid investors was new money from other investors. He did not make legitimate profits. As long as money kept coming in, his business was running smoothly. Soon, Ponzi's firm started drawing suspicion, and a Boston financial writer suggested he was duping people. Ponzi sued for libel and won. This prevented further suspicion on his activities for a short while. Eventually, suspicion grew larger. Investigative reporters from the Boston Post started paying him closer attention, and so did the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The Post contacted Clarence Barron, the financial analyst who published the Barron's financial paper, to examine Ponzi's scheme. Barron observed that though Ponzi was offering fantastic returns on investments, Ponzi himself wasn't investing in his own company. Soon, Ponzi's investors started worrying and a panic run ensued. Ponzi paid out $2 million in 3 days to a wild crowd outside his office. He canvassed the crowd, passed out coffee and donuts, and cheerfully told them they had nothing to worry about. Many changed their minds and left their money with him. He then hired a publicist, William McMasters, to ward off the bad talk. However, McMasters himself was doubtful. He called Ponzi a financial idiot who didn't seem to know how to add. McMasters eventually found incriminating evidence proving that Ponzi was taking money from one person and just giving it to the other. The Post offered McMasters $5,000 for his story. On August 2, 1920, McMasters wrote an article for the Post declaring Ponzi hopelessly insolvent. The article claimed that while Ponzi claimed $7 million in liquid funds, he was actually at least $2 million in debt. The story prompted a massive run of investors. Ponzi was squeezed dry in just one day. Massachusetts Bank Commissioner Joseph Allen raised concerns that should withdrawals exhaust Ponzi's reserves, the Boston banking system will be crippled. Allen then ordered Hanover Trust, which is Ponzi's bank, not to pay out any more checks from Ponzi's main account. He also orchestrated an involuntary bankruptcy filing by several small Ponzi investors. On August 11, 1920, Ponzi's scheme came crashing down. His past crimes were front-page news, and his last-ditch effort to obtain money was foiled. A warrant for his arrest was released, and on April 12th, he surrendered to authorities. The news brought down 5 other banks in addition to Hanover Trust. His investors were wiped clean, receiving less than 30 cents on the dollar. Ponzi went to jail and was released in 1934. Upon his release, he was deported to Italy. Back home, he attempted even more schemes but was unsuccessful in all of them. Ponzi spent the last years of his life in poverty, working occasionally as a translator. His health suffered. A heart attack in 1941 left him considerably weakened. His eyesight began failing, and by 1948, he was almost completely blind. A brain hemorrhage paralyzed his right leg and arm. He died in a charity hospital in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on January 18, 1949. Charles Ponzi, one crooked crook.